Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself, but since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF, where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-BFs from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times/dates/locations all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch, then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them, nothing beyond that. The first one is an entitled people's story. It all started when I lost my job. 20 years at the same engineering firm, and just like that, gone. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal, they insisted. I was 52 years old and suddenly unemployed with a mortgage, 2 kids in college, and a future that looked about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. My wife suggested I take some time to figure out what I really wanted to do next. "You've always talked about starting your own business," she reminded me. "Maybe this is your chance." She was right. For years, I'd dreamed about opening a food truck. I'd spent decades perfecting my recipes, specializing in globally inspired comfort food with a modern twist. Friends and family had been telling me for years that my food was good enough to sell. Now I had the time and, frankly, the desperation to try. I cashed in some of my 401k, taking the penalty hit, bought a used food truck, and spent 2 months retrofitting it. My wife helped with the branding, and my kids set up our social media accounts. We named it Global Comfort. Simple, but it captured what we were about. I developed a rotating menu of 8 signature dishes that represented different cuisines, but with familiar, approachable flavors. The first few weeks were tough. I parked in industrial areas, outside office parks, at farmers markets, anywhere I could legally set up. Slowly but surely, word spread. My Korean-inspired bulgogi cheesesteak became something of a local legend. My Thai-spiced mac and cheese had people lining up on cold days. Within 3 months, I was turning a modest profit, and for the first time in my life, I was truly happy with my work. That's when I decided to bring global comfort to my own neighborhood. We lived in a large, planned community with about 2,000 homes, governed by an infamously strict homeowners association, HOA. The community had its own small commercial area with a few shops, including a cafe run by the HOA itself. This cafe, imaginatively named Community Café, was notorious for 3 things: mediocre food, high prices, and terrible service. But since it was the only coffee shop within the community, residents grudgingly patronized it. I applied for a permit to park my food truck in the community's commercial zone 1 day a week. My reasoning was sound. I lived here, I paid my HOA dues, and I wanted to offer a service to my neighbors. Plus, I'd be bringing variety to an area that had limited food options. The HOA board called me in for a meeting. I'll never forget walking into that room and seeing the 7 board members sitting behind a long table like some kind of culinary inquisition. The board president, a retired accountant with a perpetual frown, was front and center. "We've reviewed your application," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "and we're denying it." "May I ask why?" I kept my voice level, professional. "Food trucks decrease property values," the vice president chimed in. He was a real estate agent who somehow managed to work that fact into every conversation. "They create noise, odors, and trash," added another board member, a woman who I knew for a fact had 3 untrained dogs that barked at all hours. "And most importantly," the president continued, "it would compete with Community Café, which is an HOA amenity." There it was, the real reason. The cafe was losing money hand over fist, and they were afraid of competition. Never mind that their cafe served different food than my truck, or that I would only be there once a week. "The decision is final," the president concluded, shuffling her papers to signal the end of our discussion. I left that meeting seething, not just because they denied my request, but because of their smug certainty that they could control everything within our community borders. That evening, I was venting to my wife when she suddenly sat up straight. "Wait a minute," she said, reaching for her laptop. "Let me check something." She pulled up the community bylaws and started scrolling through them. After about 20 minutes of intense reading, she looked up with a gleam in her eye. "The HOA can ban food trucks on community property," she said, "but they can't stop you from opening a brick-and-mortar restaurant in the commercial zone. According to the bylaws, any homeowner in good standing can lease commercial space for a legitimate business." I almost laughed. "We can't afford to open a restaurant." "No," she agreed, "but we could afford to open a cafe." And just like that, the plan was born. It took 4 months of planning, saving, and scraping together every penny we could. I sold the food truck to a young chef who was just starting out. My wife and I took out a home equity line of credit. Our kids contributed some of their savings. Friends who had enjoyed my food truck cuisine became small investors. Meanwhile, I did my research. The commercial space directly across from Community Café had been vacant for over a year. It was smaller, but it had a kitchen that had previously been used by a sandwich shop. The leasing agent was desperate to fill it. When I inquired, they offered me 6 months at half the usual rate. I signed the lease and began renovations, working nights and weekends alongside a contractor friend who gave me a steep discount. We kept the operation quiet, covering the windows with paper that simply said, "Coming soon." When curious neighbors asked what was happening, I just smiled and said, "Something the community needs." The HOA board members walked past frequently, clearly curious but unwilling to ask me directly. They couldn't stop me. I'd checked and double-checked the bylaws. As long as I followed health codes and zoning regulations, they had no grounds to interfere. 2 weeks before our grand opening, I finally put up the sign, Global Comfort Cafe. Under it, in smaller letters, from food truck to forever home. The HOA president showed up at my door that evening. "This is a direct attempt to undermine an HOA amenity," she said without preamble. "No," I corrected her. "This is me opening a business in compliance with all community regulations. If you'd allowed my food truck 1 day a week, I might never have considered a permanent location." She left in a huff, but not before warning me that the board would be watching closely for any violations. I just smiled and thanked her for her dedication to the community. Global Comfort Cafe opened on a Saturday morning in October. We kept the menu simple, my 8 signature dishes from the food truck, plus coffee, tea, and a few pastries sourced from a local bakery. The space was small, just 10 tables, but we made it warm and inviting with photos from our food truck days and a community board where customers could pin business cards and event flyers. I expected a decent turnout from neighbors who remembered my food truck. What I didn't expect was the line that stretched down the block an hour before opening. It turned out that while the HOA board might have been against competition, the residents were desperate for it. They showed up in droves, not just on opening day, but every day after. The community cafe, meanwhile, sat nearly empty across the street. It wasn't just that our food was better, or that our prices were more reasonable, they were. It was that we genuinely cared about creating a welcoming space. We learned our customers' names and orders. We hosted community events. We created a loyalty program that donated a percentage to the local elementary school. Within 2 months, our little cafe was turning a profit. Within 4, we had to hire additional staff to keep up with demand. By the 6-month mark, we'd expanded our menu and our hours. The HOA board wasn't taking this lying down, of course. First, they tried to undercut us by lowering prices at Community Cafe, but they were already operating at a loss and couldn't go much lower. Then they tried to lure customers with HOA member appreciation days featuring free coffee, but people still came to us for lunch. They even attempted to cite us for signage violations, but my wife had been meticulous about following every regulation. Their final, desperate move came 9 months after we opened. The board president showed up at Global Comfort Cafe during the lunch rush, accompanied by a health inspector. They made a show of walking through the kitchen, clearly hoping to find violations. What they didn't know was that my brother-in-law was a health inspector in a neighboring county. He'd been advising us from day one on exceeding code requirements, not just meeting them. Our kitchen was immaculate. The inspection found 0 violations. In fact, the inspector complimented us on our organization and cleanliness, all within earshot of the lunch crowd, which included several prominent community members. The HOA president left without a word, her face flushed with embarrassment. 2 weeks later, a notice appeared on the community website. Due to ongoing financial considerations, and the community cafe would be closing at the end of the month. I'd like to say I felt nothing but triumph when I heard the news, but the truth is more complicated. Yes, I was proud of what we'd built and vindicated after being dismissed by the HOA board, but I also felt a twinge of regret for the cafe staff who would lose their jobs. None of this was their fault. So I did something that surprised even my wife. I reached out to the cafe manager and offered positions to any of their staff who wanted to join us. We were growing and needed the help, and they already knew the community. 3 of their 5 employees accepted, including their best barista. As for the empty cafe space, the HOA put it up for lease, probably hoping for another restaurant that might compete with us. Instead, it was rented by a local bookstore owner looking to expand. She and I quickly worked out a partnership. Cafe customers could browse books while waiting for their food, and bookstore browsers could bring their purchases over to enjoy with a cup of coffee. The arrangement benefited us both, and it added something valuable to the community. Exactly what the commercial zone was meant to do in the first place. At the next HOA election, 4 new board members were voted in, all of whom had been vocal supporters of local businesses like ours. The president who had tried so hard to keep me out didn't even run for re-election. 1 year to the day after opening Global Comfort Cafe, we held an anniversary celebration. The place was packed with neighbors who had become friends and customers who had become regulars. My kids came home from college to help serve. My wife, who had kept her corporate job through all of this, took the day off to be part of it. During a brief lull, the new HOA board president stopped by our table. He raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To the best mistake our old board ever made," he said with a grin. "If they hadn't banned your food truck, we might never have gotten this cafe." I laughed and clinked my mug against his. "Sometimes," I said, "the best revenge is just doing what you love and doing it well." As I looked around at the bustling cafe, at the community we'd helped to build, at my family who had supported me through it all, I realized something important. This wasn't just about proving the old board wrong or coming out on top. It was about finding my place, literally and figuratively, in a community I'd lived in for years but never truly been part of until now. It was about turning a rejection into an opportunity, not just for me, but for everyone who now had a gathering place they actually wanted to visit. The HOA had banned my food truck, thinking they were protecting their turf. Instead, they had inadvertently pushed me toward creating something more permanent, more impactful, and ultimately more successful than I had initially imagined. Sometimes the roadblocks others put in our path don't stop us. They just force us to find a better route. And sometimes that new route leads us exactly where we were meant to be all along. As I refilled the coffee mug of a neighbor I now knew by name, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. In trying to keep me out, the HOA had actually helped me find my way in. And in the end, that was a sweeter victory than merely putting their cafe out of business. It wasn't just about winning. It was about building something that belonged, something that turned a housing development into a true community, 1 cup of coffee and 1 globally inspired comfort food dish at a time. The next one is a malicious compliances story. This happened a few years ago when I worked at McDonald's. The one I worked in was near a bunch of schools, so most of the staff was high school kids. As summer vacation started, we began having the trouble of an employee getting break and then spending their break eating their meal and conversating with their friends who were still working in the kitchen. It was having a seriously bad effect on productivity, as well as posing quite a few health risks, so our manager finally initiated a rule that if you were on your break, you couldn't leave the break room until your break was over. This went swimmingly until the kids went back to school. We then had a new problem. Short staffing during break cycles meant our ticket times would skyrocket during rushes. Management lifted the rule so that employees on break could clock in early and help out with the rush, however. The district manager didn't like the implications of employees working shortened or no break shifts and forcefully reinstated the rule. They also doubled down by saying that employees who tried to work during their scheduled break would be written up and/or terminated for doing so. QMC. The date was 4/20 a day when nobody wants to be working at any fast food place, much less McDonald's. We had been getting slammed so hard from the open of the store that we called in extra help from other stores, including the regional and district managers. As the break cycle began, the management was pleased with the sub 2-minute ticket times they had managed to maintain. A few breaks through and we were managing well. Then came my break. As soon as I sat down to eat, someone came into the store and ordered 47 double quarter pounders. This was right after the Fresh initiative where all quarter pounders were made fresh, so this was already a minor panic. Immediately after that order, someone in the drive-thru ordered 75, 20-piece nugget meal. The amount of panic in the kitchen was palpable. I was comfortably lounging in a chair, browsing my phone and enjoying my meal, while the kitchen struggled to keep up with the orders. As ticket times began to soar, the management did exactly as I expected. District manager came into the break room and demanded me to end my break early and help in the kitchen. My response was very simply, "I'm sorry, but according to the rules you made, I can be written up or terminated for completing your request." I then continued browsing my phone, trying to enjoy the last 10 minutes of my break. The regional manager entered the room and said that he would personally terminate me if I didn't do the thing that I wasn't supposed to do. The other employee who was on break with me immediately rose and clocked in, despite still having 10 minutes left on her break. She was written up for breaking the rule after the shift was over, so I felt good sitting in my chair and continuing to ignore them. In the aftermath, the people who made the giant orders took what was made after half an hour and left with refunds for the unmade food, nearly $150 each. Customers who were waiting for smaller orders were compensated with gift cards for their patience, yet many walked out without even getting their orders. We paid out nearly $1,500 in gift cards. Because customers were walking out on orders without collecting them, we had nearly $5,000 in food waste that night. All of the closers went home with nearly 2 bundle boxes of burgers, fries, and nuggets. Regional and district manager were moved to a different region. The rule was edited to say that you were able to clock back in early at the manager's discretion in the event of a rush. Because I was the only employee who held his ground against the regional and district managers during the rush, I was rewarded with free meals and drinks until I moved away from my hometown and couldn't eat at that McDonald's anymore. Although when I come to visit friends, I occasionally get rung up a manager discount by the few employees who still remember me. The next one is an entitled parents story. Hi Reddit. I don't usually post on here as I'm more of a lurker, but please let me know if this isn't the right sub, since this is more of a rant than anything else. I, 21F, ended up at a breaking point with my parents. My dad is a functional alcoholic who will drink any chance he gets if my mom isn't home, and when he is home, he will have full control of the TV. If you want to watch a movie, it has to be a movie he wants to watch with the settings he wants, which is usually very loud and without subtitles. I have ADHD and find it hard to follow properly without subtitles. And I'm also autistic, so loud noise bothers me a lot. I mention this because it is relevant to the story. My mom, on the other hand, is very passive. She has caught my dad drinking many times and never does anything about it, despite telling him he needs to stop drinking. I have told her that he drinks whenever she isn't home. She has found bottles, and we have had multiple arguments over it. She will always take his side whenever we have an argument and tell me that I'm overreacting, and that's the way your father is, you just have to accept it. My younger brother also annoys the living hell out of me. Anytime he sees me, he makes it his goal to scream and shout and be annoying. As I mentioned, I have sensory issues, so I tend to avoid him due to that and many other reasons I won't get into, otherwise we'll be here all day. Because of these issues, I end up spending most of the time I spend at home in my room isolating myself. The only time I leave my room is to eat dinner or talk to them, but I literally cannot spend more than 5 minutes outside my room without feeling overstimulated. The issue lies here. My room has a balcony which has been leaking for over 2 years. I have told them that the balcony is leaking, I have told them we need to fix it, and my parents ignored me. Because of the leaking, the balcony now has a lot of black mold. I have told them about the mold, but again, I was ignored. This week, I had enough and finally got a mold specialist to take a look. He confirmed that it is black mold and is going to charge $380 before tax. Before this, my mom had agreed to cover the cost, but now that I've told her the price, she claims she can't afford it. This would be a valid reason as inflation is rising around the world and money has become an issue for lots of people. But she just came back from a vacation last week, hosted a party for my dad a few days ago, and is already planning her next vacation, not to mention every time I ask for financial help, I'm always told we don't have enough money, only for them to spend thousands on new phones, holidays, nights out, etc. I want to clarify that I do not think my parents should stop spending money just to cover me, but being told that they can't afford something which is affecting my health, only to then see them spending thousands, just makes me insanely angry. I am between jobs right now because the job market in my country is extremely hard to get into, so I cannot afford to do this myself. Other than that, this is their house, and I don't think it's fair for me to spend so much money on repairs that they should have done years ago when I first told them. My parents also know that the mold is affecting my health and making me sick, they just do not care. I have had extreme fatigue and weakness since the leaking started. I have started to have problems with my memory, I feel dizzy often, my vision randomly becomes blurry, and I also have asthma, which obviously does not help. I guess my question is, what should I do? I don't want to spend money repairing damages that they cause due to neglect, but I can't keep living in literal mold. This is also going to really affect my bank account since I don't have a sustainable income right now, which they know. I feel like my only option is to just remove the mold myself, but that might make everything worse, as every source I have seen on the internet says that it's best to get a professional to do it. Anyways, sorry for the long rant, I just really needed to get this off my chest. Thank you for watching, I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you